The following program does not necessarily represent the views and opinions of Reality Radio 101, its advertisers and sponsors, or its listening audience. Listener discretion is advised. Good afternoon and welcome to the Bear Psychology Radio Show with psychologist, author, and speaker, Dr. Anna Baranowski, where mind, mood, and what matters to you are discussed. We're broadcasting live from Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Get ready to post and email us a message. Our email address is instudio101@gmail.com. And now, right to your host of the Bear Psychology Radio Show, Dr. Anna Baranowski.
Hi everyone, I'm so glad to be with you here again today, and I am actually very pleased and delighted to have Dr. Eric Gentry here. He is a very well-known author and speaker and has probably trained thousands of people all around the globe on how to deal with the impact of trauma. He trains clinicians and works with trauma survivors. And he's come up with a model called forward-facing trauma therapy, healing the moral wound. Now, just to start, Eric let me know that we have known each other for 24 years. We wrote a book together called Trauma Practice, and that's going into its fourth edition. We're actually writing it as we speak. Right at this moment, we've been going back and forth, meeting regularly and talking about trauma practice and, how we're going to update the book and make it more meaningful for this precise time in life. And I'm just really happy that I get to spend a little bit of time with Eric and also share with you the very particular work that he's doing. And the piece that I feel really excited about in reading his forward-facing trauma therapy is this idea of the moral wound. I have been thinking about ethical mandates, moral compass, being connected with our core values for years. And as it contrasts this idea of being morally bankrupt, ethically corrupted, disconnected from our core values. And I know that within the book, Eric refers to this as leading a principled life. Now, I know, Eric, and I'm so happy you're here. I know that, things didn't start so easy. You're not standing on high and looking down at people and saying, well, you got to do it this way, because I know that you faced your own demons. And I think that there's something very, very deep about having to go there to the deepest recesses in order to find our moral compass. So just to start with, first, I want to say thank you so much for being here with us today to speak about FFTT and healing the moral wound, and joining us to speak about this principled life. So thank you.
It's a privilege to be here, Anna. We've had such a deep and abiding connection over these years that it's a real privilege to get to spend this hour with you. I'm excited about it.
Yeah, me too. We've grappled with a lot of trauma. I mean, from those early days working at that clinic and what it meant to, we were working with Dr. Charles Figley, who is really preeminent in his work in the development of the diagnostic criterion for post-traumatic stress, and, met, daily, kind of doing that deep dive into what's going to really help these people that we were seeing. And even then, I mean, I think we were seeing quite complex cases 24 years ago when we first met.
Amen. I was thinking about that in preparation for this show, about how the seeds of where I am today were sown in those early experiences. It was all there. It's just taken 24 years to fully blossom into where it is today.
Yeah. And I really appreciate you saying that, because I think there is this grappling that needs to happen when we're growing. And it doesn't matter if you're a professional, whatever it is that you do, life demands that we continue to grapple with what we're encountering, and not to pretend that any professional degree or status or money can, exempt you from doing the inner work. And I know that, you were really trying to come to terms with your own life and your own challenges and choices, even before you started the work at the clinic. I want to just read something from your book, if that's okay.
Anything that you want to share is fine.
Okay. So you write in Forward-Facing Trauma Therapy, why I wrote this book. And in it, you say, I began my own journey in 1982 when I started working as a nighttime house parent at an adolescent crisis shelter in Huntington, West Virginia. And that over the next several years, you waged a losing battle with depression and addiction, and that you began a 12-step recovery program. What I find really very instructive and not unusual is that you noticed that as you were working through the addiction and what you described as depression early on, you were 2 years into your recovery, I suddenly began to experience intense and overwhelming PTSD symptoms. I was unable to concentrate on my work and found myself indulging in increasingly risky, self-destructive behaviors. My relationships began to suffer, and eventually I reached a point of being overcome by terror at the mere prospect of leaving my house. Now, this is after years already. You had been working on yourself only to find yourself in the depths of despair. Can you kind of help us understand how you took those steps and what it revealed to you?
Absolutely. I guess that the best frame to start is I have an A score of 9 out of 10. So that I really look at, early on in my life, I looked at addiction as an affliction. Today, I look back and see, like, I think that you've had Gabor on your Gabor Mate on your program before. I love his quote that you can have trauma without addiction, but you can't have addiction without trauma. And addiction was actually the solution for me for a whole lot of years. I think it saved my life. It kept me alive. I think I would have probably suicided had I not had, or self-destructed had I not had the relief of addiction. And what was interesting is that the addiction, the daily use of chemicals completely masked all the symptoms of PTSD. So that when I cleaned up in 1988, I had like a year of the pink cloud that they talk about. I had a really pretty good first year of recovery. I mean, it was arduous and difficult, but it was really change. And I was excited about the changes that were happening. But by 16, 18 months into my recovery, the fluidity, the intrusions, not having the chemical stimulus barrier anymore, that all of these flashbacks and nightmares and arousal was coming with just a tsunami force in my life and overwhelming me. And and so, reaching kind of an end of where that I didn't think I could go on, I reached out for help, and I started doing therapy. And I worked with a spectacular therapist, but this is 1991, 1992, in that area of time. And all we had was abreactive, going back to the memories. I spent 2 hours a week on the mat, on the floor, going back through trauma memories and just, arduously coughing up all of this pain that was truly overwhelming. My life was falling apart. I couldn't function. And, 2 years into that work, I just got overwhelmed, and it led to a relapse. That was pretty devastating. It went on for 17 months. I used for a week and came back to the rooms and tried to get clean, but I just couldn't anymore. And it took 17 months. And the last time I used in 1995, I was resuscitated in the emergency room. And that was like, okay, now I got to do something different. So I ended up going back and finishing that work. But really what that led me to, that was the seeds of forward facing, was that there's got to be a way to do this work with helping people to heal from trauma without them having to be re-traumatized by the work itself.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that became mission for me. That's shortly after that we met and have done all the work. I got trained in EMDR. I've done about 5,000 EMDR sessions in my career. And that was the start too, Francine Shapiro's whole adaptive resolution, this belief that if we can get rid of the trauma, that people will resolve, they'll adaptively resolve. And, I saw that in doing so many EMDR sessions, and that was a real impetus for forward facing. And then, over the years that it has evolved into helping people to be able to, I think the greatest thing about forward facing trauma therapy is the ability to work and resolve trauma here in the present without having to go back and slog through the memories. It's an entirely what we're calling salutogenic approach that catalyzes health, that we move our clients into health as soon as possible instead of treating a disease.
Yeah. So Eric, I'm going to just give you the opportunity. We've already talked about this because it's in the new book, the Salutogenic framework. If you could just explain that to our listeners, because you had to explain it to me, so you might as well explain it to them.
Well, it was developed by an American that immigrated to Israel. His name was Anton Adonosky, and it was being kind of frustrated with the whole allopathic model of diagnosing a disease and then treating a disease. And what he saw was that if you could help people to catalyze health, the disease went away. And we didn't have to spend time with the disease and all of this diagnostic process. And I'm not throwing that out because there are some people that have a significant disease that need that allopathic care. But as first blush, we want to help people to remove the impediments of health in their life. And as we are able to catalyze people into health, what happens is their symptoms dissipate. And what he kind of discovered was that the primary impediment to people being able to move into health was what he called back in the 80s and 90s was stress. But what we're now knowing is the threat response resulting from trauma. So simply said, that the salutogenic approach to trauma treatment is just helping people to interrupt the threat response here in real time. And when you can,
that's a big task.
It is. It's
one of the most. I get it. It's simple but not easy.
But not easy.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's like, when you start to realize that, and you recognize the work, the consistent daily practice that demands, because I don't want anybody listening to this think, oh yeah, well, it's going to be some simple answer, because it's way not a simple answer. And you actually did a really good job of expressing that to the listeners just now, as you were saying, you did your addiction recovery work. And during that early, 18 months or something, you thought you were in some kind of heaven, you'd figured out the pathway, only to realize later that it wasn't the end. It was only just the beginning. And then you were flooded with, oh, so much, pain and suffering leading to that relapse. And, this is why we can't blame people who find themselves suffering, and struggling with the, kind of the sucking chest wound of addiction. It's just a really, really hard place to be. And sometimes it's that place that, like you had said, in your lifetime, without having the addiction to turn to, you're not even sure you would have been able to get through that period of your life, which is, quite a remarkable statement, but one I can understand from some of the people I've worked with addictions, how much pain a person is in, when you're trapped in that place, and yet you had this light bulb moment, in the ER, where you said to yourself, you're going to do something different.
Yes, I did. I heard, I had an auditory hallucination of the voice of Ving Rhames, from like the actor, giant African-American. I heard this voice say, "Last chance, MFer." And I opened my eyes in the recovery room, and there was nobody in the room. And I was like, okay, my God is a 6'4", 300-pound African-American. I can live with that. I'm good with that.
Well, lucky you. You got a clear voice, didn't you?
Absolutely, I did.
That's amazing. Listen, I want to tell you that, we've got a whole bunch of emails that are coming in. I had mentioned this before to you, that during our show, we get people who write in, and I want to take some of these emails because some of them are really, really profound. This one is from Mitch. And Mitch says, "Hello, my name is Mitch, and I'm proud to have taken some workshops from Dr. Anna. This question," thank you, by the way, Mitch. "This question surrounds clients who feel they have done something so terribly wrong in their lives that they feel like this sin, mistake, transgression can never be fully forgiven, either by themselves or others. Any suggestions, tips, or lens to help therapists with such clients?" And remember, you don't even have to be a client in order for this to be something you're grappling with. Because I wonder, Eric, even when you talk about that moment in the ER and, the days leading up to it, you also might have felt like you were slipping into a place where you just couldn't come to terms with your own actions. And, I think what you're telling me is forward facing came out of that.
Yes, that was the birth of it. It took a while before it to take form, but that was the birth for sure.
Mm-hmm. Now, in your book, you say the forward-facing trauma therapy provides an answer. It offers a moral antidote to chronic stress and dysregulation that deceptively simple but profound in its implications. To heal ourselves, we must make intentional use of the space Viktor Frankl described that lies between stimulus and response. And in that space, with a relaxed body and clarity of mind, we can consult our moral compass and allow the best within us to guide our actions. And, I think that this actually speaks to what Mitch is raising, this idea of being in this terrible place where we just believe that we've just crossed a line that we can never come back from. How can you help us understand how to make that inner leap using forward facing, Eric?
So here's, and this comes from, let me give you the platform that I'm standing on. I am in, I think, 10 states in the United States. I'm qualified and federally as an expert witness for death penalty cases. And I've done a lot of testifying on behalf of the defendants for death penalty. And in the United States, in order to be sentenced to death, there is the requirement of the prosecution to demonstrate that the crime was heinous, atrocious, and cruel. And so what they've done in the certiorari process, the appeals process, is allow trauma to be a mitigator of that what they call hack, heinous, atrocious, and cruel. So I've sat across from a lot of people that have done pretty horrible things, and I've helped put together their defense with them. And what that's meant is that I've done narratives of them with their lives, and I've sat hours with them. And mostly they're confused about how they could have killed somebody. And to help them to start to understand that it was an act of self-defense with diminished functioning neocortices, with diminished functioning executive control of the brain, that it was not a moral act, it was an animal act. And to help people to understand that and secondly, I've been in recovery for 32 years, and I've sponsored a lot of men. So, we have a process in the 12 steps of, we made a searching and fearless moral inventory, and then we shared with God, with ourselves, and another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. That a sponsee writes an inventory, and then they share it, usually with their sponsor. And I've probably heard 100 inventories in my recovery career, and I've heard people share the things that they said that they would take to their grave that were secrets of deep, deep shame, and watch them get free from it with the sharing in another human being. Because what's causing it to stay in stasis is that every time that the person thinks about it, it comes with such a threat response that it slams shut the space between stimulus and response. So there's no way to do anything about it because the intention is to avoid it. And it's an instinctual response to something that is so painful. But as we can help people to interrupt the threat response as they approach that memory, and do that in loving kindness and in a ventral vagal, to use Stephen Porges' work, in a relationally connected space of where there is empathy and understanding, what happens is that the person is able to share that. And once it's shared with somebody who is empathetic and understanding, once that begins to be desensitized, even the most heinous things that people could do. I mean, I've worked with murderers who are in prison for the rest of their lives, and they have dedicated the rest of their lives to be a living amend. That their mission for the rest of their lives is to do everything they can do to repair the damage that they've done. And that seems to me to be catalyzing health from that. But you can't do that until A, you can look at the memory in a body that is relaxed, and B, I believe, my bias is that it has to be shared. And James Pennebaker at University of Texas has done a whole lot of work around that, of narrative with felons, with people who are incarcerated. And it's exciting to watch this kind of hopelessness crumble as people are able to interrupt the threat response and engage relationally with another human being and share their story of what happened. Then there's choice after that. There's no choice while it stays in the threat response.
Yeah. I also like this idea that with the FFTT, that you're not looking to fix everything, that in your words, it cannot inoculate you against sadness or shield you from the shocks and losses we all experience from time to time, but it can help you become the person you choose to be, someone who faces life feeling lighter, stronger, wiser, and more hopeful. And I think, the whole piece around that ethical, moral decision in life can start only today in this moment, even if what you are facing is the most ugly and heinous thing. The only answer still becomes, what are you going to do with it in this very precise moment in time? This is the one we get. We don't get anything that came before. And that actually means allowing ourselves to own whatever the heinous crime is.
That's correct.
I mean, there's no other way forward because, and I think this is actually really true on a much less severe level. I honestly don't know anybody who doesn't have something that they feel kind of ashamed about or, humiliated, don't want other people to see, because we all have this kind of ugliness about us, this kind of gnarly, nasty, icky, kind of gritty, yucky stuff. And I remember when I started writing, I told you about this, I started to write a memoir. And, that instead of writing just another psychology book that, like I've now written a whole bunch of manuals and books and this and that I wanted to write something that was a little bit more personal. And I start writing these really icky kind of memories of my life and sending them off to friends of mine. And, just saying, this is a story that I wrote. And it's just like so gritty and awful. And it's like, of course, how your friends are, if they're real friends, like they'll come back and say nice things like, wow, keep writing more. This is inspiring, whatever, it's like whether it is or not, or it was grim that they wrote it, you just feel in your heart like, if we start rejecting our own ugliness, we will never be able to kind of be fully with our feet on the ground in this world. Like we must accept our own ugliness, because otherwise we'll continually be trying to kill the ugliness that we see in other people that we haven't accepted within ourselves.
From the choir, a deep and resounding amen.
Yeah. There we go. And from the choir, here is a fan of yours, Eric. Hello today, doctors. I am a big fan of Dr. Gentry. Thanks for the show today. P.S. I am listening to you in Selma, Alabama, and that's from Don Dozier.
Hi, Don.
Yeah, that's nice. And this is another one. This is from Helga, and Helga says, hello, I noticed that Dr. Gentry has an accent. May I ask where he is from, and what and why was his addiction? Do you want to answer that, Eric?
It's Anna that has the accent. I speak normal.
Yes. Okay. So I have a Canadian accent. Yeah. Yeah.
I get a little extra syllables out of every vowel. My grandfather would get, he could get 3 syllables out of yes. He would say, yes. I'm from Southern West Virginia. I was in West Virginia's first punk band. That will date me and give you my age. But yeah, I grew up in the coal fields of Southern West Virginia.
Oh, so what if people want to Google your punk band, Eric?
Oh, I don't think that there's anything left of that. But it was called, the band was called Submission. I don't think that we have any kind of that, but I do have my music is on cleanmusic.com.
So was that a premonition? Submission?
Yes, it was actually named after a Sex Pistols song, but yeah, we could
You're
definitely
go with
call
that. Okay, and then the other part of the question is what and why was his addiction? Part 2.
It was everything. What I'm really clear about is that, after 32 years of recovery, it's not about that people don't get addicted to anything, that they have addiction, and an addiction will then become obsessive, compulsive, and self-centered around the use of that thing. And what I found, and most people that have addiction find, is once we take the drug away, then there's food, sex, and money that becomes that all becomes working a program on. Is that addiction continues throughout life. It is an internal condition and not a substance dependent a malady. It's not a substance use disorder. It is an internal adaptation to developmental trauma.
Oh, sure. Because as long as we have the externalized addiction, something to numb us out, then we never have to, like I was talking before, really sit with that grittiness, because there's always something there that can keep us from actually sitting in the quiet space with all of that yuck and muck.
And people with ACE scores can't sit in that quiet with muck unless they have somebody to teach them how to do it.
Right. Okay. Now I'm going to go back to that. Now you said that you have an ACE score of 9. And sorry, just to be clear, so that the listeners understand, not everybody knows what an ACE score is. So do you want to talk a little bit about that and about the study?
Yeah, I can do that in a minute. In 1997, Vincent Figley and Robert Anda, Kaiser Permanente in California, Center for Disease Control in Atlanta, I did this study with 17,000 people that were part of the health network of Kaiser Permanente in Southern California. And what they did was they asked them 10 questions about their development. And that was childhood physical abuse, childhood sexual abuse, childhood emotional abuse, neglect, physical neglect, emotional neglect, separation of parents, domestic violence, mental illness in the home, alcoholism, drug abuse in the home, incarcerated family member, 10 of those things. And they asked them to identify how many of those things that they had. And then they asked them a bunch of health questions. And what they discovered was that the more of those ACEs that you had, the higher number of those occurrences that you had before the 18 is the exponential growth of the risk factor for everything bad. That somebody with an ACE score of 5 has an 8 times greater risk of being somebody who is an alcoholic, versus somebody with a 0. Somebody that has an ACE score of 6 has a 20-year difference in lifespan when compared to the mean score of people with ACE, the mean death age of people with ACE score 0. That it's just crazy. People with ACE score 4 have a 15 times greater chance of attempting suicide than somebody with an ACE score of 0. So those ACE scores turn into what Nadine Burke-Harris, who is the Surgeon General of California and a pediatrician, has called toxic stress. That's often subclinical for the DSM, that it doesn't necessarily produce a diagnosis for the DSM, but it is corrosive to physical and mental health. So that in the second half of life, people that have high ACE scores that don't treat it end up with lots of mental and physical illness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How's that? Did that encapsulate it?
That's really good for a minute, Eric. Jeez. I think maybe you've given that speech a couple of times in your lifetime.
Not just that one, not exactly that one, but yeah, I have. I love that work. It's really vindicated those of us who are trauma clinicians. It's really shown that trauma is at the center of everything.
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely, absolutely. But you know what's interesting? Sometimes you trip or you slip or you find yourself kind of in this lucky place where you're using something at an early age that helps you mitigate some of those early things. Now, I actually never did my ACE scores, but I have absolutely no doubt that they're probably super high. You know a little bit about my history, Eric, so you probably understand that. But I'm like, I know I don't have PTSD, and one of the very, very early things that I engaged in, and there's lots of research on this now as well, was I signed up for a yoga class, and it just did things to my nervous system that allowed me to tolerate a lot of what I had lived through and lived with. And that was really life-changing in that inner supportive way that is all about kind of building resiliency and resourcefulness in the gentlest of ways. But I have to say, I remember some of those early yoga classes going in and feeling that I liked it immediately, but having the most kind of difficult internal processes to contend with. But within that supportive environment, I was able to do that. So, I agree with you that, sometimes what we really need are the practices that help us kind of find peace with what is inside.
And, the recent research over the past 3 or 4 years two randomized control trials have demonstrated that yoga is more effective treating the symptoms of PTSD than is cognitive behavioral therapy. You got to love that. And what it's really driving the field towards is that we got to get away from all the cognitive processing on this stuff, because the thoughts are the exhaust. That people who are traumatized, the thoughts are not the cause. The thoughts are the outcome of the trauma experience, that the cause is somatic, that we got to get people in their bodies and help them to interrupt the threat response physiologically. And that was something that you did from an early age by being able to be in the yoga. And that's really cool that you were able to serendipitously find your way there.
Exactly. And I mean, I think, with our book, Trauma Practice, that was always integrated right from the beginning. The breathing exercises, the layering, and then, the thematic map and release, the shake to release, all these exercises that integrated elements of what does it take for you to be in your body, to let the body experience, to lean into that rather than simply kind of whip up a storm with the stories that you tell yourself. So let's move back to our email list. And here, this one is from James Yanni. And James says, what does EMDR stand for? Go ahead, Eric.
Eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It's a treatment of trauma that was developed by Francine Shapiro in California in 1989. It became available to consumers in 1991. I got trained in 1993. And it uses a process of bilateral stimulation, usually eye movement, what we call saccadic eye movement, back and forth, where the therapist moves their finger and the client follows the movement back and forth. But it can use any bilateral stimulation, sounds on either ear, tapping on either leg. It's what it does is that when you do stimulation on alternatively on one side of the body and the other, is it forces information across the corpus callosum, which are the fibers that connect the two hemispheres of the brain. And Bob Scare, who is a neurologist a big dog in the field of trauma, what he says that does is it microseconds shuts down the amygdala. And the amygdala is the hub and the wheel of fear. It's what generates the threat response in the body. So that ongoing interrupting of the threat response using the bilateral stimulation, what happens is for people is that whatever's pushing on consciousness, these memories, this old feelings, and the stuff that they're involuntarily suppressing because it was so painful, during an EMDR session, it just kind of, it just bubbles up and they go, oh my God, I forgot all about that. And that's the splinter that was causing the symptoms. It gets integrated, and it's kind of like, after 5,000 sessions, I did one yesterday, and it just was this spontaneous resolution. And I was like, WTF, what just happened? Like, how did that? I have no idea how that happened. And it continues to baffle me. It's all science-based, but just because something's science doesn't mean that it's not a miracle.
Yeah, I mean, there's research that's been done on it, but how is it that it creates this profound outcome in those moments? It's really a thing of beauty, for sure.
It really is.
I want to talk a little bit about forward-facing specifically, and this comes from John Grenier, and he says, what is a very simple explanation of forward-facing? And is Dr. Gentry the inventor of this? Thanks. And I just want to respond by saying, yeah, thanks for getting us back on track, John, because I think Eric and I could talk for probably 3 days in a row, and there might not be a lot of breaks. But, going with this whole idea of forward-facing, Eric is the developer of forward-facing. This is his book, and you can get forward-facing online. All you have to do is type in forward-facing trauma therapy, and you will find a copy of his book on Amazon. But his book is actually really terrific because it gives you templates and different mechanisms for working through in developing your own forward-facing trauma therapy. And it looks really to me like a lot of it is about intentionality and a kind of development of your own inner discernment, a leaning towards what is truest inside of yourself, using your moral compass and having that really well developed. I mean, a lot of people get this when they're young, and they grow up in a family that teaches them, these are the ways to kind of develop a moral compass. Maybe they get it from teachers or spiritual leaders, but not everybody has that. And sometimes we can see that in the world around us. We can see people running around trying to fill their emptiness with things that are not of any depth and do not nourish. But with this forward facing, the idea is that you want to be nourished, but by what is very deep within inside of yourself. And Eric does a really good job of developing templates for your mission statement, your vision statement, and your code of honor. Eric, you want to take over there?
Yeah, let me do this in 90 seconds or 2 minutes, somewhere around that. And I'll make it really simple. Here it is simply that every single painful experience we've ever had in our lives, whether it's physically painful or emotionally painful, what happens is when that experience is encoded in our memory process, it's charged by the amygdala. So it is encoded with fear and terror. So stay with me. What that means is the next and future times we encounter a situation that has any sensory similarity to that painful learning experience, that sensory memory intrudes into the perceptual system of the present, causing us to perceive threat where there is no danger. And what that means is if those of us that have had lots of painful experiences in our past, that means that we perceive a more dangerous world. That's what traumatic stress is. If you want to cook down the essence of what traumatic stress is the perception of threat where there is little or no danger. Now, what forward facing does is to bring this truism forward, is that if there's not real danger, you don't need self-defense. And if a person stays in the threat response, if they're perceiving a threat here in the present, like somebody that has A scores perceiving threat relationally, what happens is the energy in their body increases, which causes the part of their brain that they need to manage that energy decrease. So they reach a place where they go into compulsive, animalistic aggression or avoidance. They become involuntarily mobilized to engage instinctual patterns of self-defense. And so many of my clients are just trapped in these patterns of involuntary self-defense. So in forward facing, there are two things that happen. Anna's been nailing the second nicely, is that there is intentionality. But before there is intentionality, we got to work with our clients to build the skills in real time to be able to get out of their heads, go into their bodies, discover that they are jacked up. That's a clinical term. That they're jacked up, that their muscles are constricted involuntarily, and release them. And when a person who has involuntarily constricted muscles releases that constriction, they are restored back to comfort. They're back to a sense of well-being. Their brain reboots. They get back optimal functioning. And now from there, in a parasympathetically dominant nervous system that's not being driven by the threat response, they can choose how to act in that particular situation. And they can now restore where previously they were breaching their integrity because they were becoming involuntarily aggressive or avoidant and derailing their intention. Now in a regulated autonomic nervous system, they can confront those same circumstances where a spouse rolls their eyes at you, or a child is not acting the way that you want to, or your bank account doesn't look the way that you want it to. In a regulated autonomic nervous system, you're still having a sense of well-being. You're still comfortable, and you could still choose right action in that moment. Stay in the threat response, and you'll find yourself doing something against your will. There is, in the simplest, shortest version of forward facing that I can do right there.
Magnificent. I think that is so perfect, because you marry the two of these elements together so beautifully, and it creates this transition into a place where people can not only get to a resolution by lowering the volume on their nervous system, but also then move into a place where they feel good about their intentionality, living their life with purpose and peace. Because it's much more peaceful when you feel like the manner in which you're behaving in your life is in alignment with your moral compass.
And if I can say one more thing,
yeah,
the most exciting thing that I do, there's a lot of exciting stuff that happens in forward facing, but when it dawns on my client that their violations of integrity, their moral wounding, their actions that are in violation of their code, it's not a moral problem. It's a physics problem. That they got too much energy in their body and they are compelled against their will to act. That's not a choice. It's not something that they've done by choice. It's something that has happened involuntarily. And when they finally get that, when that light bulb turns on, that most people, even the most hardened combat veterans that I've worked with, that the tears fall down their face, that they have the moment that Robin Williams gave Matt Damon in Good Will Hunting. It's not your fault. And it's really pretty beautiful to watch that happen.
That's lovely. This is from Liam Trollis. He says, this is an amazing show and topic today. Dr. Gentry gives hope to thousands of people in the world that are facing these issues. May God bless him. So I thought I would just read that to you.
All right, on.
It's so sweet, eh? Here's one from Paula, and she says, hi, Dr. Anna. Is that book that you talked about that you gave your friends available to the public? If so, where can I purchase it? That would be a very interesting book to read. Oh, thank you so much, Paula. I am in the process of writing that book. I have written quite a few chapters. I have not polished it. It's not available yet. And I appreciate the encouragement. I am continuing to grind out on it. It is it's a hard one to write. I have to say that. And here's another one. This is from Ron, and he says, hello from Greenville, South Carolina. What is your guest's website? Eric, could you answer that question? The one you prefer. I know you have a few.
Forward hyphen or dash, not hyphen, forward dash facing.com.
Yeah, and I think that's also going to be on our website, where we post the radio show for anybody who wants to go back to it. The podcast gets posted. It also gets posted to our YouTube channel, What is PTSD? YouTube, What is PTSD? And if you want to go and pick up information or, be notified of next radio shows, you can go to annabaranowski.com and just, sign up for updates on our next show, which comes out once a month. So thank you so very much for asking those questions. And then finally, this is an interesting one. This is from Stephen. And Stephen says, just curious here, has COVID brought on more of these mental issues with people? And has Dr. Gentry's practices helped? Thank you.
That's for me?
Yeah.
That's a beautiful question. Yeah, I always talk about, and I'll make this as quickly as possible. But for diagnosis of PTSD, the person has to have encountered actual or threatened death, serious injury, or sexual violence. They had to either directly survive it, witness it in vivo, learn about it happening to a close friend or family member, or through repeated exposure from work. So in 2016, there was research done that in the U.S. that 90% of Americans at some time in their life had encountered one of those experiences, actual or threatened death, serious injury, or sexual violence, in one of those four ways. So that 90% of Americans had a traumatic event in their life. Yet only about 7 to 9% of those folks have met diagnostic criteria for PTSD. Most people don't get traumatized from traumatic events. Actually, most of them grow. 14% have post-traumatic growth 30 days after the trauma, which is really intriguing, but for a different course. Well, after COVID, I'm pretty sure that it's about 100% that all of us have had exposure to actual or threatened death either for ourselves or through a loved one as a result of the pandemic. So what I think has happened to the baseline level of perceived threat and activation over the past year is I think it's significantly cranked up. I think across the board, people are perceiving more threat. They're more anxious. They're more polarized. They're more aggressive. They're more avoidant. And so, yes, I think that it's absolutely. And what's really cool about that is as you learn to interrupt the threat response, you get to have well-being, no matter what the rest of the world's doing. And that's pretty exciting. And I think a message of hope is that my responsibility is to manage my autonomic nervous system, no matter what's going on around me.
You know, there's another piece about this element of COVID and the threat that it has created in our communities, and the community idea is the whole thing. There is absolutely nobody who has not faced some kind of fear during this period of time. And it creates this clarity that we are all one and all connected. If you're open to that notion, there's no difference between any of us when it comes to COVID. We are all the same, and we're all facing this on some level. Some people may feel it as a physical threat. Other people may have felt that their income is threatened. But the one thing that is true is that we've all had some kind of impact because of it. And Sebastian Junger, I don't know if you're familiar with his work, Eric, but
Yes, I am.
He's written a beautiful book called Tribe on homecoming and belonging. And, you know, his work kind of looks not only at military members who have come together and, you know, during their time together felt that they were interconnected in a way that helped them prop each other up, but that historically at times when there have been wars or famine or, you know, serious events in communities, people would come together. And it actually was a restorative element because people were truly supporting each other. And it's when we no longer support each other that you see an increase in PTSD, when you understand that you can turn to the right and the left and see people right beside you. The occurrence of post-traumatic stress is much lower.
Yes, if they are connecting. Yeah. But the problem with saturation with trauma in a community is that it produces polarity. Also, so you got that. You got deep connection on one side, you got polarity on the other. So it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah, it can be. And I mean, we're seeing that polarization quite a bit. And, you know, we're seeing like a lot of conspiracy theories and things like that, that actually speaks to that, that side of it, where, you know, that's all about separation and how, you know, we can't trust anybody. And, you know, so certainly there is that element of it for sure. Absolutely. I wonder if you're familiar with Martha Beck's book, The Way of Integrity, Finding the Path to Your True Self. Are you familiar with that, Eric?
I'm not, no.
This is really interesting, and I think it sits quite well, you know, for people who are interested in Eric's forward-facing trauma therapy. This one fits quite well because Martha Beck's The Way of Integrity presents a 4-stage process that really kind of works with finding integrity and using it to create a sense of purpose, emotional healing, and to kind of free yourself up from your mental suffering, because you're going into this place where, again, it's a lot about that, you know, going deeply within yourself and kind of uprooting the things that are not in alignment with what is true for you and bringing yourself back into a place of kind of honesty within yourself, so that you're not stuck with this terrible discomfort between what is on the outside and what is on the inside. I think it's really an interesting look at doing that deep dive within inside of ourselves and how we can become healed when we find our own way of truth within inside. So it can be actually a really profound way of heading into like that space of inner truth, and when we're out of alignment with that, how much we feel tortured by it. What are your thoughts on that, Eric?
I concur 100%. And the reason why forward facing is out there and not just being ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy, the difference between is that acceptance and commitment therapy does not pair the importance of the self-regulation as a front end of capacity to be able to hold the path of intention. And so what it ends up happening with a lot of those folks is that they use brute force to stay in alignment with their integrity. And that is unsustainable for somebody that has a history of trauma. They can't do it. And they will breach.
That you say that, Eric, that use of brute force. And actually, I think that's why for a lot of people, the CBT approaches really end up demoralizing rather than helping. And it's interesting to me because a lot of the work that we did in phase 1 of the trauma practice book that we wrote is all about creating that stabilization and integration of that arousal phase and helping people kind of guide in towards what is it going to take for you to find stabilization. What are the things that will really work for you? So yes, brute force won't work. So don't bother trying that. You're kind of on a road to things falling apart rather than being sustaining. It just doesn't work. It's a kind of pretend game and can leave people feeling like no matter how hard they try, they end up in the same place.
And there's the moral wound. There's the chronic moral wounding is I try and I fail. I try and I fail. And when they are able to walk into those high demand situations now in a down-regulated autonomic nervous system, they try and sustain themselves all the way through that context and come out on the other side, self-efficacious, look back and have the experience of triumph, of being exactly how they want to be. And it's just so exciting to shepherd people through those very nascent beginning experiences of being able to stay the path of integrity through high demand situations. And the only way they can do that is by continuously interrupting the threat response. And as they are continuously interrupting the threat response, that the trauma of their past is infecting them less and less. They are in real time pairing exposure with relaxation, which is reciprocal inhibition, which extinguishes the trauma response, which is the way that we heal trauma here in real time. And it's pretty darn exciting. The more a person lives by integrity with down regulating into high demand situations, the more they are living free from the trauma of their past. It's just healing right here in real time, but without us having to go back to the memories.
I think there has been a shift in terms of the kind of therapy that is available today, and the fact that, and this is really for the listeners, whether you're therapists or you're individuals who are listening out of interest of your own history of trauma or the struggles you may have faced, that, there are people out there doing really profound work. So if you find that it's beneficial for you, take those steps forward and find somebody who can really help you lean in to that place where it's not so much about the story, but it's about finding some peace and quiet with the places where the wound is still alive, so that you know how you can be friendly with yourself and gentle and accepting with that pain that is surfacing. And also, like I always say, you want to practice. You want to find strategies that you can use every single day to practice so you can care for yourself. Eric, we've got about 2 minutes, and I wanted to give you a little time if there's anything you want to say to our listeners today to wrap up. And I just also want to say, hey, thank you so much for joining us today. It's always such a delight. And I'm so grateful for the work that you're doing.
Thank you, Anna. And we are partnered, I think, for the rest of our days in this mission of ours. And that's a beautiful thing. I'm very, very grateful for our connection. I do want to say that I am generous to a fault. And I have the whole course of forward-facing trauma therapy available for free on YouTube. You can just search me, J. Eric Gentry, PhD, and you'll find my YouTube page. And I've got 3 free courses on there on video that you're welcome to. If this is intriguing for you, you could go check it out. You can't get any credit for it, but you can learn about how it works and what's going on with it. And if any of you are feeling like that you want to learn about how this stuff works relationally, you are welcome to reach out to info at forward-facing.com. And tonight I'm at 5 p.m. Arizona time, which is 8 p.m. Eastern time. I'm doing an hour on forward-facing and optimizing relationships to see how this works relationally. If you're interested in that, you're welcome to attend. It's free for the public.
That's very generous. And thank you so much, Eric, for joining us today. And thank you, everybody, for logging in and listening today, and for your questions, which make the show amazing and so engaging. Eric, I'm going to speak with you real soon, and just logging off and looking forward to hearing from everybody again next month. Everybody, be well and be gentle with yourself. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Bear Psychology Radio Show with psychologist, author, and speaker, Dr. Anna Baranowski, right here on Reality Radio 101.